You're listening to Titans of the Trades. I'm your host, Ryan England, author of Hire Better People Faster and creator of the CoreFit hiring system, a proven process to help growing companies attract and retain only the best. I'm on a mission to revolutionize the perception of the trades and elevate it to new heights. After growing up in a blue-collar family, my passion for making the trades cool again runs deep. If you're a titan in the industry and want to be on my show, stick around until the end and I'll reveal how you can be my next guest. Welcome back to another episode of Titans of the Trades. I am your host, Ryan England, and today's show is amazing. Today's guest he's incredible. He has not just a great story about the things he had to overcome to get to where he's at today, but the company that he's invested in and the company and what they're going to do for real estate across this country is just, it's revolutionary. So I will let him tell his story, but I want to welcome to today's show, Damion Lupo. He is not only with Turnkey Retirement, but also with FrameTec. He is their chief investment officer. And just get ready to take some notes because there is so much knowledge that this man has around growing a business and being financially free that is incredible. So I want to welcome to today's show, Damion Lupo. Damion, welcome to the show.
Ryan, it's great to be here, man. Thanks for having me.
I am so looking forward to today's conversation. We had a little chance to talk in the green room before I hit record, and I'm just excited about where you're going. But before we get there, tell me a little bit about what got you to where you are today, some of the challenges that you've gotten through, and why you do what you do.
It really comes down to blood and mud. It was blood and mud in the streets. People are like, well, so what's your degree? And I'm like, it's the University of Hard Knocks and the School of Hard Knocks and the University of getting the crap kicked out of me. Because I went out there, I actually got thrown out of college because I started a bookstore on campus. And they said, you literally put the bookstore out of business, shut it down, or we're kicking you out. I didn't shut it down. They kicked me out. I paid for school. And then I went off and started 70 plus companies. And it was all those different iterations as an entrepreneur in my blood. I was going out there and learning. It wasn't academic. It was literally, this is what works and what doesn't work. Most of it didn't work. And it led me to different journeys, being homeless and all this stuff when I lost all the money and made it back. So it was really who I am. I'm a guy that just bleeds and gets muddy. And that's what I've been doing for 30 years.
Oh, that's great. I hear 70 businesses and I think I'm exhausted with one. And I'm sure so many of our listeners are thinking, how do you do 70 in that period of time? I imagine they weren't all at the exact same time. Is that fair?
Yeah, it was definitely mostly sequential, but when I was doing real estate stuff in the early 2000s, I probably had 20 companies running simultaneous, and some of them were sort of holdings. There wasn't a lot of stuff going on, but it's a lot of, every time I think about, it's a lot. And I look at Elon Musk and he's got like gazillion-dollar companies, but like 4 of them, and he's trying to run the federal government and kill $2 trillion. And I go, I'm not that busy. Like 70 doesn't even seem like a lot. So it's kind of funny to think about it if you start comparing a little bit.
Yeah, well, Elon is not human, so we're going to start with that. He's from another planet. I am convinced, but no, that's fantastic. So you've had 70 opportunities to learn and grow, and to fail and grow and learn, right? Like, so there's been a lot there. 2008 wasn't too kind to you. Is that fair?
I think every time I say that, somebody goes, "Yeah, I had a situation," and it's. But I realized, and I wrote a book about this in 2012 called Reinvented Life. And I wrote it. People were like, man, thanks for writing this. I did the same thing or very similar. And I was like, yeah, you know what? I guess 2008 wasn't just me, but it felt like it was just me because when you lose everything, whether in my case, it was 25 million, but if it's 20,000, it's everything you got. It's still everything you got. And if you're homeless or you're beaten up, man, you still got to recover from that. And it takes time. It took me 5 years to even come back to the place where I was willing to stop sucking my thumb, get out of the corner and engage, because the trauma and the scar tissue and the muscle memory is pretty damn intense, but it can be overcome if you're willing to get back into it and you realize that didn't kill me. So you know what? I bet there's a whole lot of learning I can leverage from.
Yeah. And that led you to developing some principles so that people could learn some very different mindset shifts or some ways of doing things so that they could retire, they could leverage the assets that they're creating through their business and some other things. Talk to me a little bit about that.
So the first thing I did after that whole meltdown, I thought about some of the lessons I got from mentors. And it's funny, Ryan, because part of what I stopped doing was listening to mentors when I was on the rise. I was like, man, I have 10 feet tall, bulletproof, and I am Superman. I wasn't even very super smart. I was kind of dumb and just arrogant. And on the other side of that, I was like, okay, what did they teach me that I didn't do? Oh, they said they had rules. So I started writing down, I have a 2-page thing for my rules about investing in business. And those rules were put in place to protect me from my ego and my pride and all the other stuff. And then my team knows what these are. They're public. Everybody can get a hold of them. And then people can say, well, wait, you have this rule. Why are we doing this? And I'm like, you know what? You're right. So it keeps me in check. And that was really the start. What is the framework? Why am I going to do? Otherwise, we chase all these shiny nuts like a bunch of drunk squirrels. And it's like everything is attractive. And now I have guidelines where I say no to most everything, which is what super successful, super wealthy people do. They say no to almost everything. And everybody else is like, yes, 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 like freaking Jim Carrey in the movie.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think about that with Elon Musk. You can't do what Elon Musk does and say yes. Like you can't. You have to say no to almost everything. Or if it is something you want to pursue, you have people to do it for you, so it doesn't distract you. But I'll tell you, I suffer from that shiny object syndrome. I know so many entrepreneurs in the trades that suffer from that. There's this new technology, or AI is the big thing. Everybody's like, how do we get AI into our business? And it's these things that they start pursuing and they lose sight of the other things. I've also seen them where they finally get into a point where they're cash flowing really well and they're making more money than they've ever made before. And then they like, I'm going to go buy a second home and I'm going to go on vacation, and they lose sight of the business. And then they wake up 2 years later and go, what happened? And I think a lot of it is just they get distracted and they chase these shiny things.
People tend to have affairs in their business called a lifestyle. And one of my mentors years ago told me, I was talking about all sorts of stuff. Man, I'm moving to the beach. I got an oceanfront property. He's like, look, man, you can either build a lifestyle or a business, but you're not going to build them both at the same time. And I'm not saying you can't have both, but when you're building something, there's a period of time where you've got to focus. And if you're having an affair on your business, the other one is that, oh man, it's not that much fun because I'm not making money. Usually if people are making tons of money, and there's a lot of momentum, it's exciting. But when it starts to be hard, they go, oh, I bet I need to do a different business. So they go have an affair on their business instead of fixing the problem. And they think, oh, shiny object, greener grass. And that's one of the mistakes. Then you're starting over, you're getting in the back of the line. And that's crazy. You lose all the momentum and all the learning from the thing that you've been doing. And I mean, that's classic.
Yeah. You know, I know some people that are much younger than me, and I watched them right out of high school. They were so laser focused on the thing they were doing. And for 10 years, they just did it, and they ate ramen and they drank tap water, and that was it for 10 years. And then all of a sudden they're like, you know what? I finally figured out what I need to do to make this business work. And then from there, they're an overnight success, right? Like it's just, you look at them, you're like, they went from rags to riches overnight. Yeah. After 15 years of just blood and sweat and mud and everything else to make that happen. So our listeners are in the trades. They are entrepreneurs. They are leaders inside these growing organizations. And most people would agree that over the last decade, being in the trades has been tough, primarily from a labor perspective. Nobody wants to work. Everybody's lazy and entitled. We can't keep people. But you're part of an organization that's done some different things. Not only are they revolutionizing the building process, but they are also doing some amazing things with company culture, reducing turnover and everything else. Tell our listeners a little bit about FrameTec and what you're up to over there.
FrameTec started from a place of we weren't thinking about making a buck. We were thinking about making a difference. And I think a lot of times that comes up, but then we somehow end up focusing just on the bucks and not, why are we here? When we get excited, like our team, our core team that started this thing, I mean, the guys in Arizona, we're literally texting at 4:00 in the morning, which is probably super unhealthy, but there's so much excitement. We can't sleep. And this is like no joke. We're engaged in this. Okay. We want to build and solve the problems, and people that show up, they're like, man, this is a cooler. This isn't just me punching a clock, hammering or stapling something. There's something really big here, and there's an energy, there's a vibrancy, and the different organizations that all work to help support FrameTec, there's the same culture of we're doing something that's going to help people. It's not just, hey, we're not just moving paper around. It's not a financialization thing where you're like, okay, I'm selling this, buying this, and nobody really cares. It's a black box. FrameTec is about solving a huge problem, the housing crisis. And anybody in the trades knows this has been a problem that's getting bigger after 2008 when a lot of the supply chain died. And then you're right, it's really hard to get people that want to do things. But you know what people want to do? They want to have purpose. And when you create an environment, as you well know with culture, and we've created this environment where people are like, man, I am cared about. I am loved. You guys look at me as an asset. You don't look at me as an expense on a P&L. And the stuff that we're doing that I don't think anybody else in the industry or in America is doing outside of like the Google campuses. We're doing some stuff where people go, I'm never leaving. And so we don't have turnover. We have people that are happier, they're healthier because of the stuff we're doing. So it's asking that question, what are we doing that's impactful? And then how are we looking at the people? And if you change those two things, everything changes behind.
It's interesting. I mean, if I look on the surface, FrameTec is manufacturing, right? It's a new way of creating trusses and everything else for real estate or building homes. But when I look at your vision on your website, I see that part of your vision is creating jobs. It's not just building stuff. You want to create jobs. Talk to me a little bit about that.
So what's happened in general in society is we see we see big companies buying other companies, and we don't see a whole lot of new anything. And so we use a lot of automation. What we're doing to build the floors, the walls, the trusses for a house or an apartment, all that stuff, if we did the same thing with traditional stuff that was done a few years ago by most of the companies, we'd need about 600 people. Our system produces the same amount, better quality with 180 people. So the naysayers say, well, you're killing 400 jobs. I'm like, nah, we just created 180 jobs. And these are jobs that we're using. We're side by side with automation, with AI, with robotic systems. I mean, it's the most technologically advanced plant of its type in the world. It's very cool with what we're doing. And then we look at people, we say, okay, how do we pull the maximum potential out of you and then give you a place where you feel proud and you get excited about coming here? And you're like, man, I want to show my kids what I'm doing, where I'm at, my people. And that's the difference with what FrameTec is doing. It's solving a problem by creating more capacity, which, by the way, also reduces the prices of housing and other things, because when you have more supply, guess what? The cost goes down because the demand is going to continue, but we're actually adding more supply, which is the missing element. That's why shit is so expensive. It's because there's just not enough supply and there's not enough workers. But if you create a place where they love, guess what? People are going to want to show up and do the work.
Well, and I love what you said too, because as you were talking, I was thinking, you know what? Especially in manufacturing, we've got more automation, we've got robotics. There are a lot of people that are worried they're going to lose their jobs because of AI, because of these advances in technology. And one of my beliefs is, no, we're not going to really eliminate a lot of jobs. You're just going to have to skill up a little bit. You're just going to have to be paid to think now, do human stuff, which I think for too long, especially in some industries, we've just gotten used to people doing things that robots can do, and then they see their jobs go away. But if we can skill them up, and when they're excited about the purpose, like you're talking about, and the impact we're making and what we're doing, they're willing to do that. They're willing to put in that investment, make those changes so that they can be a part of it long term. I mean, is that fair?
Yeah. And what's interesting is people tend to not leave. Sometimes they leave for money, but they leave because there's not a growth opportunity, because they don't feel valued. Like, this is the typical turnover. They're like, man, but people will stay for less money, and not like 50% less, but sometimes. But what they do is they're like, yeah. I mean, there is a human element. Like, you can't say I don't care about money, because you got to feed you will die. Like, there's a survival thing. But when people see, okay, you know what, like at FrameTec, some of the things that are very different, and we did this because it's the right thing to do, and it's innovative, and hopefully people go, man, you know what, if they're doing it, we can do it. So we're doing things like, okay, we're putting a cafeteria, we're feeding people, we're being very selective about what kind of food gets in there. It's not a bunch of Twinkies and ding dongs, to create a bunch of ding dongs working for us. It's literally whole foods and real things. And we're like, okay, that's good. We start there. What's the other big pain point? And this is like one of those things that every employer and everybody that's building something should be asking, what are the pain points for my people? You know what a big pain point in the trades, people that are working? Childcare. And they got one person that's working full time just to pay for the freaking kids to be somewhere else. And they're like, I don't want this, but I got no options. We're building a childcare facility on site so people can bring their kids. It's not an economic hardship, and they get to have lunch with their babies. That's cool. And then we're building a wellness facility on site so that people are not only taken care of if they hurt themselves, but they go there preventatively, which is the opposite of how healthcare is in America. They get to go there and they get to have whatever the stuff is that they need to keep them healthy. So we have a very healthy culture, and their family, their kids, they're all coming in there. We're doing this on site to take care of our people proactively. That is a huge difference versus saying these are disposable cogs. And this is our family. And when you start treating people as family doesn't leave, man. They just deal with each other even when it's hard. They're like, man, we're family. We're gonna have Thanksgiving, even though I hate your politics or I want to punch you in the face, but we're family. And that's how people treat each other at FrameTec.
Yeah. I love that you've taken that position of, they're not just cogs in our machine. These people are not disposable. They're not just replaced when things get tough, but also stepping back and saying, okay, if I walked in their shoes for a day, what are the things they struggle with? They struggle with childcare. We know that. They struggle with staying healthy because everybody's working so many crazy hours and everything else. And yeah, in the trades, there's a little bit of physical activity to it, but usually not the right kind of physical activity that keeps people healthy. I also know that a lot of them struggle with meals because you know what? What do? They stop by Circle K and they grab a burrito and a soda every morning. And you're like, no, we're going to stop that. So I love that you've taken this step back and said, how do we bring value to their personal lives beyond the value they're bringing to us at work? But how do we bring value to their personal lives? And when you do that, I truly believe, and the studies would suggest, that pay does not become their top motivator anymore if they do leave. They're looking at other things.
Ryan, there's something that's funny because when you think about this big picture, like when you look at health insurance companies, there's a lot of thinking around that right now. And are they just evil? And the problem is they're thinking very short term. They're saying, okay, we're going to provide this benefit to somebody as little as possible because they're going to be gone in 5 years or 10 years. We're looking at these people and saying, how do we invest in them, their training, their knowledge, their bodies, their families, our communities, because we expect them to be here for the next 10 or 20 years. And so when you start doing that, one of the things that's crazy and totally accurate is that you end up more profitable. Your health insurance premiums drop because you don't have as much illness. You have people that are less sick, so they're there more. Guess what? You've got more production. Like all these things, people are happier. You have less fights. I mean, to the extent you have fights in a manufacturing plant, but it's a better environment. It's a happier environment that spills into the communities, and we're in rural areas. So we're creating, this is a big impact on these rural communities where we're going to be the biggest employers in a lot of the places we are. And we're creating a way for people to stay in the communities, raise their families. And so it's really meaningful. And then when you do that, what people don't tend to realize is if you do the right thing, this is not a government mandate with like ESG or something. This is doing the right thing. And the right thing ends up being incredibly profitable.
Yeah. And I've heard this so many times, and I believe it to be true because I've seen it work. When you invest in your people, they reinvest back in you and the business. And that's exactly what you're talking about. So here's how I want to bring it down a little bit now. So a lot of the people that we work with, a lot of the contractors out there, they're smaller, right? They might only have 60 or 80 employees, and they think of something like subsidizing the cost of childcare or meals or something as this impossible dream, something that will never be able to happen. So what are some actionable steps that our listeners could take to start moving towards this idea of pouring into or investing in their people that aren't as big as create on-site childcare, on-site, gyms and those sorts of things?
So it's interesting because you and I were talking about some work by Dan Sullivan that 10X is easier than 2X in terms of thinking. And that makes me, what you're asking makes me think about that stuff. If you've got 60, 80 employees, it just reminds me of when I had 6 or 8 or 1. And I'm going, man, I can't do anything. I can't get health insurance because I'm too small. It's really hard to operate super small. So one of the things that a mentor of mine told me about 7 years ago, he said, look, here's what you got to do. And I'm looking at him going, man, that requires a bunch of people. People are painful. They cheat on you. They do all these bad things. And I'm having this panic attack about hiring and scaling. And now, we're scaling past 200 people. With the second plant, we'll be at about 650 people. And I'm like, okay, so what was the shift? The shift was if you've got 60 or 80 people, first off, figure out what pain points are. Like, what am I going to do that's going to help people? And if you go, man, I couldn't do that, but how could you do it? I think that's a great question. How could you do it? Like the old question, what Robert Kiyosaki used to ask when I was hanging out with him, he'd be like, man, stop saying you can't afford it. How can you? And I'm like, cool. So I went out and did some dumb things instead of asking also, should I do this? But how can you? Should you do it? Yes, it's good for your people. The how can you oftentimes is saying, okay, I've got 60, 80 people. I could do this if I had 150. So what do I need to do? Who do I need to become to go to 150? Sometimes it's literally you have to grow into that space because the things that you want to do to serve the people, you can't do at the size you're at. And that's you stretching. And guess what? You have more impact. It's more meaningful. So sometimes it's expanding your thinking exponentially, and you're not going to brute force your way into 10X. You're not going to brute force your way into going from 60 to 200. You're going to have to think differently. And that's a really cool thing because it's this growth process for you and your organization, and your culture will thrive generally.
I love that. So not only is it changing your mindset, but it's just changing the way you think and how you set your goals and what you want to accomplish. And I agree with you. I've interviewed some people on this show, and they've told me, things were really hard until I hit 200 employees. And then I had resources. And then I had people that were smarter than me that could handle this stuff. And then I had people that showed me how to go to that next level. And I think that that's one of the things is that growth doesn't always have to be painful. Sometimes growth is necessary to get the things that you want out of your company, out of your business. I also know that, I mean, we work with companies that have 10 employees and we work with companies that have 500 employees. And I would say that they both share the same set of problems. Like I've learned this about business. The problems are all the same, just have a different number of zeros in them, like what it costs you. But when you get to 400 or 500 employees, there are people, you have resources, you have teams that can just embrace and say, we can fix that problem next week. Whereas when you're 10 employees, the owner's got to fix that problem and they don't have next week to do it. But maybe in 4 months, they'll get that problem fixed, right?
That's one of the fun parts about moving past the 10 people and then the 50 people. You get to start really spending time on the things that are more in alignment with you. Like when I do tech support, unfortunately or unfortunately, I have skills and I've done too much of it. So then it sometimes defaults back. And then I start seeing as we've scaled and grown, I see these people that come in with this 20, 30 years of it, 40 years of experience in their thing. And I'm like, wow, in my whole, like in 1,000 years, I would never be as good as you. And I'm so thankful that you're here. And the opposite is also true, Ryan, that you get the wrong person. Like if I was permanently the IT guy, something is going to get hacked and we're going to burn down. Like it is a problem. Like that is not sustainable. So one of the things that everybody should be thinking about is when you ask yourself, what do I do next? You may need to start doing some cutting on some people that are not the right fit, either cut them and move them somewhere else or get rid of them. I mean, one of the things that I've learned is that a cancer in an organization will eventually kill you and the whole thing. And that's something that people don't like to deal with because it's painful, but death is pretty bad too. And I would say that it's worth cutting the thing out. And that's the thing that I've struggled with over the years. I just sort of tolerate until it's intolerable. And that's a thing for us to all look at on a regular basis.
I've never met an entrepreneur say, oh, I let that cancerous person or that toxic employee, I let them go too soon. Should have held on to them for another year. It's never happened. It's always the opposite. Why didn't I do this 12 months ago? Why did I even hire this person in the first place? I knew better. I saw the red flags, but I did it anyways because I just needed the extra set of hands. And I think that's a big part of it is they're thinking, I need to expand the machine and a cog is better than no cog at all. So I'll just hire the next person that shows up with a set of hands and hopefully it works out.
That's one of the most dangerous things. The hiring by proximity is one of the most dangerous things that anybody does in business. Oh, you start off and you hire your neighbor because they happen to be a CPA, but they're actually an idiot. You hire somebody just because you knew them since you were in 5th grade together. Like there's a lot of stuff in different levels. You hire people and it doesn't mean you don't hire people. I've known this guy. I trust him. Okay, cool. But it's when you have something, when you have that great mousetrap, when you've got the bait where people are like, I want you, you get to pick. If you only have one option for somebody, you don't have options. You don't have choices. You're basically, it's an either or. Either I do it or I don't. And then if you don't, it's like, oh crap, I got to do this myself. What the whole point is, you got to have more than one option or you don't have any options. And that's what shifts the power dynamic where you're making decisions based on being rational versus being in fear. It's a totally different mindset of how you're deciding things in your business. You can create those options. That's the thing. But you got to think about your thinking versus just reacting to things and acting like.
One of the things I found that I think hurts a lot of companies that are in growth is they just need to fill positions and they're not really thinking about what qualities make the right person. They never sit down and say, who would be the right person? They just go, do they check the box for degrees and education and skills? And it's like, well, there's a whole much more to it than that, which is why that employer brand and that culture is so important. Like who's going to really fit the values and behaviors of the organization? And once we help them all the time get really clear on that, all of a sudden they're like, I'm looking to hire a completely different type of person because that's what's best for me in the company. And that proximity goes away.
We use a tool, and there's lots of tools out there, whether it's these different personality profiles. The one that I've been using for about 10 years is called Culture Index. And it's fascinating to me because in 15 minutes, it gives me data on, I've had the guy that I work with tell me, absolutely do not hire this person. And when I've said, no, they're nice, they ended up quitting or something that happened. I'm like, damn it. And it gives you some guidelines because we tend to, we're human, we're emotional. We make decisions that aren't necessarily logical or thought through. especially when we're in a place of scarcity, man, I need a butt in a seat because some butt has to be in this seat. And sometimes it's better to move a little bit slower and methodically and have the right butt in the seat, like Jim Collins talks about in Good to Great, Built to Last. Like, you got to have the right people and you move them around. And the crazy thing, and I'm sure you've said this before, but you get these A+ people, they not only do they not cost you anything, A+ people make you 10x what they cost, if you will, their expense. People that are B's and C's, they'll cost you more than their salary. I mean, it's like, they don't make you money. People go, I need to have my people make me 2 or 3 times what I pay them. You have B and C players, man, you are going to pay way more than you realize because of their ineptitude and the fails that they make and just the lack of caring. So I say you got to make sure that your focus partially is on A+ and have a boundary around that, or you're going to have a lukewarm culture.
Yeah. And one of the things that we found, and we actually assess the organization with this, if you are not an A+ team, don't be mad when A+ players leave, because A+ players want to play for an A+ team. And so sometimes you have to look inward and say, am I an A+ team? Am I someone that an A+ player would want to play for? And often we find that you're not. And so it's that time to say, hey, it's time to reinvent ourselves, to think differently, 10x thinking, and get out there and say, how do I become the team that an A+ player wants to play for? And that can transform your business real quick.
And guess what? You just did. You empowered yourself with the ability to do something different. If you're thinking, I got to fix other people, the problem usually is right there looking at us in the mirror. And what you described is very focused on self-responsibility and the control that you have when you're focusing on your own internal whatever and then acknowledging what's true. What is true? That was my therapy for 2 years after I lost everything. What the heck is true? And I went deeper and deeper. And if you can get clear and you can set your ego aside and you can say, man, I'm actually just operating as a B player, but I'm trying to get A+ people. You realize, oh, either I need to get out of the way or I need to improve and evolve and step up. That's empowering. When you just get mad at people for leaving or not being A+, but you're B's, you're exactly right. A+ don't want to work for a non-A+ culture. They'll find the A+ culture and then they'll keep everybody else out.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Damion, this has been awesome. I know we could keep talking forever, but I'd love to wrap up because you have an offer for our listeners to help them with some of this 10x thinking, just thinking differently about not necessarily their business as much as their financial acumen and how they think about their finances, which translates into their business very easily. So tell me a little bit about that offer for our listeners.
So I created this thing after my personal experience of making millions and then going to -5 million and then coming back and making millions, making tens of millions, and then crossing 100 million. And it was, my thinking was, okay, there's got to be a process. What was the process? So I went backwards and I came up with these 10 steps to 10 million. And the way I look at it now, if you're trying to make $1 million or create a few million, you're maybe middle class. Like million is not, it's like, it doesn't work anymore. You got to have 10 million. And part of what happens is if you're personally saying, okay, my bar is 10 million, you've got to evolve. You might have 20 or 30 or 40 employees and you're like, man, I got to have 100 if I want to hit the 10 million. And so what it's doing is it's forcing you to expand, your spirit to expand. And I boiled it down. It's a 10-minute read and you get it at turnkeyretirement.com. 10 steps. These are things I did. This is not academic, Ryan. This is my life. And I've done it multiple times. There's multiple companies. I mean, so anytime you can see something that somebody's done repeatedly, it's probably not a fluke. It wasn't a lottery event. There's probably some foundational principles. That's the idea here. In 10 minutes, you're going to have some things you're like, some of those things you may know, but it's a great reminder. And some of the things you're going to go, dang, I never thought about that. And it'll help you go 10x in a real practical way. So I encourage everybody to go download that thing and gobble it up.
And I'm gonna tell you, because I hear all the time, this is for our listeners, oh, I've got this short read, and then they download it. It's like a 90-page book. Part 1 is literally 2 pages. Like it's literally 2 pages. So, and it is giant font. It is not small font. So when Damion says that this is quick and it's 10 steps there, it's quick. He's not kidding. He didn't mess around. So definitely go to Turnkey Retirement. Check that out. We'll have that in the show notes. So if you're behind the windshield right now, when you get back to your office or you stop, you can go ahead and check that out. Damion, this has been amazing. This has been so great to hear about what you're doing in the industry. You're revolutionizing it, the things that you've learned along your journey, and all the wisdom and little nuggets that you gave our listeners today. Thank you so much for being on the show.
I appreciate your time. Thanks for being a great host.
Ryan England here. Thank you so much for listening to Titans of the Trades. If you're a titan in the construction, manufacturing, or skilled trades industry and would like to be a guest on my show, please visit podcast.corematters.com. If you found value in this interview, would you share this episode on social media? Just do a quick screenshot on your phone and share it with a friend or post it on social. And if you know someone that would be a great guest, tag them on social media to let them know about the show and include the hashtag Titans of the Trades. I love seeing your posts and guest suggestions. We are regularly putting out new episodes and content. To make sure you don't miss any episodes, click the subscribe button. Your thumbs up, ratings, and reviews go a long way to help promote the show and get me one step closer to solving the labor crisis facing the industry. Want to know more about how we're doing that? Go to our website or follow me on LinkedIn. Thanks for listening.